And hello and welcome to another Movie Boozer Pubcast. This is our Sharch episode 3 for 2019. I guess I don't even necessarily need to give the year just because this is our first Sharch as opposed to Shituary.
But, the show evolves. So.
Right. Last week was random movies that we found on streaming. This week is Nicolas Cage, or as I'm calling it, Cagey Nicolas Week.
This is the one that I was most excited for. And I've been a Nicolas Cage fan forever.
Oh, same here. Cage is a great actor, and I think he's a creative person. He comes up with the most unusual reads on lines, and in a way that really is truly entertaining and transfixing.
And he's passionate about his work in a way that other actors aren't. Not that he's more passionate, but his passion comes from a different place.
Yes,
like his famous freak out scenes. Again, this could also be something that he's bullshitting us about. Like a lot of his performances come from a very emotional place, and he says that people think it's a joke, but it's not.
And that's the thing. I don't consider it a joke. I mean, I think sometimes they do wind up being kind of funny, but it's not. It's not funny within the context of the scene that he's performing. It's funny when taken out of context because they are so emotional. Yes. And honestly, any huge emotional meltdown can feel funny if given the wrong not circumstance, context. If no context is provided.
Yeah. So
we chose these movies specifically because the one unfortunate thing with Nicolas Cage is A, the dude likes to work, and B, he also needs money.
Yes, he needs to pay off the castle.
Yeah. So the result is that he's appeared in so many movies, and many of these movies are questionable, to say the least.
Yeah.
So we went ahead and we picked out some movies from streaming, 3 of which were pretty much released direct to streaming as far as I know. I don't think they got much of a theatrical release at all as far as I can think.
And I think 2 of them came out in the last year?
Yes, 2 of them came out in the last year.
Which I didn't notice until I was watching them.
Yeah, one of them came out in 2016. We did find one film from his early career back in 1991 that I chose simply on the strength of how poor the reviews were for it. And we'll get into that in a minute. But first, why don't we start with the epic action film 211?
Yeah, we'll say epic.
Yeah. So
I did not like this one as much as you did.
I did. Well, first of all, as far as liking the movie, I can't say that I, quote, liked it. What I did, I think I went in with such low expectations, probably off of my coming off of that, of having just recently seen Boone the Bounty Hunter. I was pissed. Mm-hmm. But anyway, and so what I found in this movie was it didn't accomplish a lot of what it set out to do, but one thing it managed to do was at least keep up some tense moments throughout that built to the final confrontation, and that was at least something. And Cage gets one good freak out sequence that really, I think,
moderate freak out. See, I was a little oversold on that one.
Oh yeah, okay.
When you said good freak out sequence, my mind had gone to his movie Rage, which is a Russian revenge movie, and he just kind of goes nuts in that movie. But this one, he does some yelling, and it's decent. It qualifies.
It qualifies. There we go. It would appear if they did another Nicolas Cage loses his shit supercut, it would probably appear.
It might, yeah. So this is the bank heist movie,
kind of. Really, what it feels like to me. There was a direct to FX original movie about the North Hollywood shootout in like the early 2000s, and it kind of reminds me of that. It's very procedural, showing a bank robbery as it's happening. And oh, by the way, when I just pulled up the Wikipedia page for 211. It says here the movie is based on the 1997 North Hollywood shootout.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Well, there we go. That's why it seems so familiar. Although it fictionalizes the events completely, setting it in a fake city called Chesterford, Massachusetts. Although it's funny how Massachusetts looks nothing like Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie was shot entirely in Bulgaria, so that's interesting. And part of the cast is clearly Bulgarian. There's a bunch of people in the film whose accents just don't sound like an American accent should sound.
Right, which is something that you see a lot in these direct-to-streaming movies because the international market is growing for films and is becoming a cheaper way to film them.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of, I will say, these Nicolas Cage direct-to-streaming movies are some of the better quote-unquote direct-to-streaming movies starring aging actors because Nicolas Cage is usually in them. You can select pretty much any movie from the last 5 years on Netflix that has Bruce Willis on the cover, and he has like maximum 10 to 15 minutes of screen time in the movie.
Yeah, that's
Cage is usually the main actor.
Now he doesn't have a speaking role in this movie for the first 20 minutes.
Yeah,
I count it because it went on. Now that said, once he's in the movie, he is in the movie.
Yes. I mean, he just obviously cares about what he's doing. Bruce Willis, I don't really know what he's doing.
Yeah. So the plot of this movie, basically, Nicolas Cage is a cop, and he bumbles into a heist at a bank that is being undertaken by a group of disaffected former special forces soldiers who are now mercenaries, and they're trying to steal money that in a very kind of overwritten thing. Rather than them just robbing a bank, they decide that they're going to rob a specific bank that an antiquities dealer put a bunch of his money in.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they knew in advance that his money would be there or something. But
yeah, they kill the dude, right?
Oh yeah, that's the opening of the film. It takes place in not Bulgaria, Afghanistan.
Right.
And they kill this antiquities guy who's. It begins with a classic low budget hacker scene where this computer expert, in air quotes, is transferring money by pressing the button that transfers money to all of the banks because that's how it works.
Right. At least he didn't have one of those hacking scenes where the better hacker is the guy that types faster.
Yes.
which is the cardinal sin of hacker movies in like the early 2000s.
One of my favorite examples of Hollywood computer tech is in The World Is Not Enough, the James Bond movie, where Jonathan Pryce, to show how awesome he is at computers, he types an entire article with one hand while he's standing up. He has a keyboard that's like a one-handed standing keyboard, and he's just like tap 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 tap.
Oh, Tomorrow Never Dies.
Did I say? I said The World Is Not Enough, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tomorrow Never Dies. Whatever.
Which, I don't know. All of those Pierce Brosnan Bond movies run together, except for Die Another Day.
GoldenEye stands on its own, I think.
I guess GoldenEye stands. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, all right, that's fair. They have their
enough, and Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah, those two. Even though I don't mind most of those movies, Die Another Day I think is the only true failure of the four. I would say that the only legitimately good one though is GoldenEye.
Yes, although Die Another Day kind of comes back around and is kind of awesome for how shitty it is.
I don't know, that was like the death knell of the series for me. And then Daniel Craig brought it back for a couple of movies, and then Spectre was another death knell. And so, and speaking as a lifelong Bond fan, Spectre was a movie that just depressed me. So 211 is not particularly that interesting of a movie. It does, once the action sequence at the bank happens, I would argue the you do legitimately care for the life of Nicolas Cage, and I think he builds a decent enough bond with the high school student who's doing the ride along with him.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think I think I cared. Excuse me, allergies are really bad this month. I think I cared more about the life of Nicolas Cage because it's Nicolas Cage and not because his character was altogether that interesting.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
But I'm a little biased.
I think the kid did a pretty good job. He at first the opening bullying stuff I wasn't a fan of, but first of all, they give him shit to do, and he has a decent enough scene. I mean, when Nick spoiler alert, when Nick Cage's partner is dying on the table, not on the table, rather, dying on the streets, though doesn't actually die, but at least he wasn't gonna actually die. But
well, yeah, they're making it pretty. I've never been shot, but I think they make he gets shot in the leg. This partner character, and he's like really dramatic, where he's like completely pale, like I'm bleeding out, and then right. I don't know. Maybe that's how gunshot wounds actually work. I'm not an expert in that.
There is a major artery in your leg that if
it's
severed,
I guess yeah, they hit that.
If that major artery is severed, you can bleed out in like minutes. It's actually pretty fucked up.
Okay, I rescind my criticism then.
Yeah. But it's really well done, that scene, and I do think that the actor who plays his partner, I think he was very convincing in reflecting the loss of blood and just like the kind of going in and out of consciousness, and the kid. I guess the thing is there wasn't so much to this movie story-wise that I was just concentrating on the performances. And I gotta say, I kind of put myself in that kid's shoes, because how awesome would it be at an age like that to get a chance to play essentially the third lead against Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Not a good movie overall, but I would say, maybe it was that thing where I put myself in the kid's shoes and I'm like, man, I'd like to meet that kid and just ask him, what was that like?
Yeah, that's fair. I was mostly bored by the movie. I think some of the action was okay. I mean, it had a decent look to it. It was coherent for the most part.
You could at least tell what was happening and the architecture of the scene. You could see where people were and why people couldn't get, places and stuff.
Yeah, for the most part. I think that stuff around the car was a little bit incoherent sometimes, like knowing where everything was. But overall, the director clearly was working to make it a coherent sequence. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's always hard to make these movies compelling when most of the film is one sequence, and I think it did okay in that regard.
And then the movie takes a giant dump in its final scene.
Yeah. Is that the one where they're at the kid's house?
Hey, Caillou, I want to take some pics.
Hey, where's that phone you're always fooling around with? I want to take some more pics.
I was telling you in Facebook that is the most grandpa I've ever seen Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
It's like full on Grandpa Cage, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I've never seen Nick Cage play a grandpa before, and when you think about it, he's up there. He's getting to that point.
Yeah. That whole thing was kind of weird though, because they established twice that this kid films things on his phone.
Yes.
And when the dying partner is filming a death video for his fiance or whatever, or his wife, and he's like, oh shit, the battery's about to die, but then it just never does, and it's not that big of a deal.
That was a bit of a cheat, I think. That feels like a post-production cheat, like that wasn't planned to be in the shot, but they're like, we need to make this more tense. Make it so that the battery icon is on his phone, so we think it's dying.
And if he's filming a video with however it was, 8% battery left, and it never dies for the rest of the movie, I want that quality of phone battery. I can leave Facebook open on my phone and that shit drains in a couple of hours.
Well, he does plug it into a car for some extra juice to call his mom.
No, that's true.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't have much else to say about this one, do you?
No.
All right.
I will say that at the very beginning, when the partner, before you know who he is, his wife's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and like his acting in that scene is weird because he seems surprised and a little bit put off by it.
Yeah.
And at first I thought, I was like, this dude's a villain and that lady is toast. He's gonna kill her or something, like gonna stab her. And it's like, oh, that's a because these streaming movies from all other countries always have these like fucked up openings where it's like, we're serious about how evil this dude is, but then he ended up being the secondary main character.
Okay, so just for fun, I looked up the director of this movie. So suddenly I have something interesting to say. The director, York Shackleton, is a former professional snowboarder turned music video director and filmmaker. It says here that some of his early film his early film experiences was directing commercials for Mountain Dew, Taco Bell, Airwalk, and Right Guard.
Nice.
So that's a good way to get paid. I'm just looking for his filmography. Some of his movies include, oh wow, most of these don't even have a Wikipedia entry, but there's Urban Struggle from 2009.
Yeah.
That when I click it though, it says that it's a film made in 1981. So clearly that link isn't even accurate. A movie called Kush from 2005. I've not heard of, but it apparently was nominated for Best Drama for High Times Stony Awards.
They make so many of those every year.
Yeah, so he is a director, I will say that much. Anyway, Zandali. Zandali is
surprised I'd never heard of when you recommended it that we do that one.
I was previously only familiar with this movie from a ubiquitous film clip of Nick Cage. There's so many Nick Cage freak-out film clips, but this is one of him basically crying and screaming and slathering himself in black paint.
Yeah.
And that is only a very tiny aspect of how fucking weird this movie is.
So, Zandali takes place it's filmed in the 90s, takes place in the 90s too, I think, right?
Yeah, in the French Quarter of New Orleans.
Right, which is a good setting for a movie, especially a movie like this. And I think the setting really does a lot for the mood of the film.
Yeah, it's sort of a steamy erotic thriller, though the thrilling part never really takes off for me. It's really more of a erotic weird.
I think Wikipedia classifies it as an erotic thriller / romantic tragedy.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
It's got Nicolas Cage as this painter named Zandali, and
no, his name isn't the girl is Zandali.
Zandali is the girl.
Nicolas Cage has the wonderfully generic name Johnny Collins.
That's right, and then his best friend is played by Judge Reinhold.
Yes, and really the star of the movie is Judge Reinhold, playing Terry Martin, but it's Terry spelled Thierry. So Thierry. Yeah. So so Judge Reinhold is married to Zandali, and the two of them are a couple that they clearly love each other, but sexually they don't have much chemistry, and it's made pretty clear Judge Reinhold just can't get it up.
Yes.
And meanwhile, Judge Reinhold's old school buddy Nicolas Cage shows up, and he's a painter, an artist, so he's got that mystique about him, and he's very much kind of self-interested. Can't hold down a job, kind of a waste of a person in a lot of ways, but he immediately pursues Zandali, played by Eric Anderson, and in just the most not cool thing to way to treat your friend.
Yeah, it's right away. Like he doesn't even think for a second.
To the point where there's even a scene in the movie where Nick Cage basically not forces, but comes close to forcing her to bang him while her husband is in the next room, and he straight up says, "Let's do this while he's in the next room."
Yeah, he even calls her out too. He's like, "Let's see if you want." Like something about that. He challenges her.
Right. And so before long, after a series of very, very weird sex scenes, uh,
Yeah.
some of the most unsexy sex scenes I've seen.
Oh yeah.
I will say this movie does accomplish it. For those of you who might have been interested in seeing Judge Reinhold's ass, you can see it in this movie.
Right. Young Judge Reinhold.
Yeah, young and spry Judge Reinhold.
Yes.
For what it's worth.
So I want to say that I messaged you about this when I was watching it. This movie feels like one of those fake Judd Apatow movies within a movie. Like if Judd Apatow was still making these broad comedies, and like Judge Reinhold was a character in his movie, and Judge Reinhold's like, "Oh, I'm in this new movie," and then Zandali is like the fake movie that has a whole bunch of bullshit in it that's just totally stupid.
Or maybe even like one of those fake Seinfeld movies.
Yeah, something like that. Just like there's something like several degrees off from normal in this movie. Like the way that the line readings and some of the stuff, like when I first got this feeling is when Zandali is like jogging and she just happens to be jogging through a construction site, and some guy who's like shoplifted a TV runs past her, is like, "I'll sell this to you," and like whatever. And then the police pull up, and he's like, "Oh, you got me." And then he like runs down and tries to grab the TV off the ground again, and they arrest him, and then he does a run up the wall while they've got him handcuffed.
Yeah.
Like, well, they're holding on to him, and he runs up the wall and does a backflip. It's a very strange movie.
And, then, of course, eventually Judge Reinhold finds out about the affair. And it's weird how he takes it. Like, at first, he takes it kind of, well and forgiving. And he and Zandali kind of go out on this trip that is supposed to be like their fresh start, to which Nicolas Cage just barges himself in on. And yes, this causes Judge Reinhold to go straight up suicidal, pulls a gun and takes him on this weird boat ride, and then finally just pretty much kills himself. I mean, he doesn't really kill himself, but he does.
He like jumps in the water and refuses to let himself not get saved. He refuses to let himself get saved from drowning.
Yeah, which, I mean, that takes some definite talent, I have to say.
That whole sequence felt like someone trying and failing to emulate the style of like F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ernest Hemingway.
I will say this movie has a tiny role, but an entertaining role from Steve Buscemi.
Oh yeah.
His credit, by the way, is OPP man. So he's down with OPP, right?
Yeah.
But that just means Orleans Parish Prison. But yeah, he plays basically a criminal who's being forced to be basically a garbage man. In which is interesting. I've never seen that before. Maybe that's a thing in New Orleans. I'll have to talk to Bill A. about that one.
Joe Pantoliano is a cross-dresser, I think.
Yes, that's right. He plays he plays a cross-dresser who owns a dress shop, and Zandali. Basically, he is the he's the gay sidekick in most romantic comedies, but he happens to just be in this drama for some reason.
His character did nothing. There's no point for him to be in this movie at all.
Well, he in a couple there's a couple of lines he has where he distributes some magical gay knowledge or something.
Yeah,
that's the thing about this movie. It has some stereotypes in it that are a little bit unusual.
It's a lot of it's a lot of just really weird ideas kind of thrown together, and then it's strung together by like this romantic drama storyline.
Now, overall, while I cannot say that this movie is good, I did find it compelling. It was definitely unusual, and I really did enjoy the. While it's not good, I have to see say that it. Well, first of all, it's. I admit I love Judge Reinhold, and it's nice to see him in a serious role, and he's good in the movie, I would say.
Yeah, he's trying for sure.
Yeah, and
Everybody's trying.
It's just too bad the movie doesn't turn out as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. Any other thoughts on Zandali?
Not really. It's just one of those kind of indescribably odd movies. It's not like a really super weird, but it's just kind of strange. Like you're like someone who like maybe not like an alien tried to make a movie to blend in with humans, but somebody was trying to pretend something and they made this movie, and you can tell that they didn't quite know what was going on.
From the director of Free Willy 3, The Rescue.
Yes.
All right. And next we have The Humanity Bureau.
This movie is super goofy.
This is one of those movies that if you describe just the premise of the movie, people will be like, "Oh, there's promise there. I've seen some movies like that." And then you watch the movie and you said, "Yeah, I've seen some movies like this, and they're all better."
Yeah, like that's a good thing or a good example. The log line of the movie is pretty interesting. It's pretty exciting, and then you realize that the budget they had to film this script is probably a third of what the script might have been calling for.
That and the script is just not good. It's basically generic tropes from post-apocalyptic fiction all thrown into one movie. You know, you've got like dystopia. Dystopia / well, you know what it is? It's not unlike the first Mad Max or maybe what's it? The more recent one, where it's not complete apocalypse. It's like humanity's starting to fracture and fall apart.
It's a little bit of Divergent, a little bit of Mad Max, a little bit of Minority Report, maybe.
Yeah, and just because of the title, a little Adjustment Bureau.
Yeah, so Nicolas Cage plays an agent of this bureau, and essentially he will go to different families and kind of grade their worthiness to go to this facility where they'll be, you know, healthy and happy and housed and fed and everything.
It's called New Eden, and basically the idea is if the government decides that you're no longer contributing sufficiently to society, then they send you off to New Eden. Which, does that sound like a concentration camp to you?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
I mean, you will call that from the beginning, and they even try to make you think that they're. Because early in the movie, when Nick Cage finds out the truth, they make a conscious effort to not show you what he sees, and then at the very end of the movie, they show you, and you're like, "Yeah, I know. He was horrified." So we assume that they're killing people.
It's such a terrible plot twist as well, because if your main character sees something but the audience can't see it also, the main character loses his agency as someone that you can follow with the story.
Right, and occasionally not revealing something to you that you know someone else knows can be useful in some suspense, just not in the way they did it here.
Well, because they just kind of ignore the fact that he saw something awful. He just makes a decision to help this lady and her kid out.
Right.
And then at the end, you see what's going on. But then you've already figured out what's going to happen because the bad guys are coming after him. Let me just say, the bad guy in this movie is hilarious. He's got like a stupid-looking eye patch, and all he does is like... My favorite scene in the movie, potentially, is like they've hacked into like a drone feed, and they're spying on Nicolas Cage, and he's like, zoom in, and his henchman is like, we can't. And he's like, we can't do that because we're borrowing this from the military's drone. And the bad guy is like, don't they know how important this is? And his henchman is like, no, sir, I don't think they care either. And it's like there's elements of the script that maybe it was a little bit more in step with its tone. And then it's somewhere between a rewrite or the direction, it kind of lost a whole bunch of self-referential comedy.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what's going on with this movie's tone, but it's got this feel of something that maybe was a little bit wackier and a little more avant-garde with its material, and then just ends up being a pretty grim, generic science fiction chase thriller.
It takes itself deadly serious throughout, and you're right. It almost feels like there was once a campier aspect to it that was removed.
Because the bad guy, his eye patch, it looks like he popped the lens out of a sunglass and then just glued it over his eye.
That could very well be what happened.
It's a goofy ass look, and I can't take him seriously.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where the movie it never really takes off like it should, and it has such a generic story to tell. Cage, I mean, he does his best with the material, but there's really nothing to rise above. And by the way, this movie transgresses in a bad way anytime someone's in a car.
Yeah.
The awful production. I mean, fake driving in a movie has never looked more ridiculous.
I mean, maybe excluding Steven Seagal, because you get like a half a second cut of his face. Steven Seagal, so it's clear he's not driving. But this one, you mentioned Nicolas Cage's wheel control when you messaged me about this. Like he does that bad wheel control, like where he's moving it a little bit too much, like he's a 5-year-old pretending to drive a car.
Yeah. Oh,
if he was actually, if the car was moving in response to the way he's turning the wheel, he'd be swerving all over the road.
I honestly wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he knew, like, at some point he was like, wow, so this movie's gonna be shit. I'm gonna see how far I can take this wheel control before the director stops me, and just no one stopped him.
Right, and I had the exact same thought about I mentioned this to you earlier about The Wicker Man.
Yeah.
Because there's a specific line in that movie where he walks up to a girl who's got a bag, and he's like, "What's in the bag? A shark or something?" And it's like, there's no way somebody wrote that line in the script. There's no fucking way.
Who thinks of that?
Yeah, who even thinks that? Nicolas Cage thinks of that. That's who thinks of that. So I kind of want to go back and rewatch some Nicolas Cage movies and look for more examples of this, where he realizes the director's heart is not in the movie, so he just kind of goes for it. Because Nicolas Cage seems like that kind of kid that would misbehave until an adult tells him not to, just to kind of tries to push some buttons in a harmless way. And I would totally not put that past him as an actor to be that kind of actor as well.
Yeah. I don't have much more to say though, because this movie was just kind of bland.
Yeah, it's got a very, very limp sense of tension and forward momentum.
I will say that this movie, after the first 20 minutes of this movie, I stopped watching it on my TV and I pulled it up on my laptop and proceeded to go do tasks while I was watching the movie. It's not a good sign when a movie does that, when it compels me to do something productive while watching it, because I don't like multitasking when watching movies.
I wanted to mention another one of my favorite scenes in this movie is there's like this school play or whatever, and the boy, the main character, he steps up and he recites the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
And then after the show, Nicholas is like, "You were good, like really good."
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that.
Pledge of Allegiance, like it wasn't like he was acting.
Yeah, and they were saying like it was your typical terrible kids thing. Now, of course, you never want to tell a kid that you were, you sucked. But maybe, I guess the one thing is, I guess, spoiler alert, the kid is actually his son.
So he felt that kind of like, he felt good about this kid, and because it was his son, like,
yeah.
Come on, better than the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like recite some, I don't know. That was so funny to me. Like they made this huge ass deal out of it.
The only thing I can think of is because the kids are singing Amazing Grace and then they sing Pledge of Allegiance. Both of those are public domain, so maybe that was it. They couldn't come up with some other song.
He should have just recited something from the Jungle Book or something.
I mean, what if he did the Pitbull song from Gotti? Wake up, motherfucker!
That would be good.
That should be in every movie, by the way.
It should, yes.
So speaking of what should be in every movie, Dog Eat Dog.
Yes.
This was the accidental good movie of the week, I would argue.
I was fairly certain this was supposed to be really shitty, but and for the first couple of minutes, I did believe that, and then all of a sudden, Paul Schrader comes out with like this ridiculous vision of a completely
amoral black comedy.
Amoral black comedy with stylistic shifts and everything. Like there's a sequence where they do drugs, and he completely screws around the color filters and distortion in the visuals and all kinds of crazy shit. Like this is Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, directed last year's First Reformed and wrote it, which is one of last year's best movies. He did a Nicolas Cage movie called Dying of the Light, which I haven't seen, but apparently it got taken
I've heard decent things about that one.
Dying of the Light?
Yeah.
It was a...
Oh, wait, hold on. No, I'm thinking of a different Nick Cage. Dying of the Light I've seen. That's the one where he's got, like, basically Alzheimer's,
he's dying.
Right?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. He's got some kind of terminal illness.
Yeah, that movie is a piece of shit.
Had a final cut privilege taken from him by the studio, and so in the time since, he and Nicolas Cage and other members of the cast and crew have actively disowned Dying of the Light. I thought Dog Eat Dog was a similar situation, but after watching it, this is wholly Paul Schrader's vision, and it is really wild.
And as much as we're giving Cage credit, while this is definitely a Nicolas Cage movie and there's some good Cage stuff in it, the movie belongs, as far as I'm concerned, to Willem Dafoe as Mad Dog.
Which is interesting because that role was intended for Nicolas Cage, not from the point of writing it, but when Paul Schrader went to Cage, he said, "I have this role for you." And Nicolas Cage said, "Well, I just did a role like that, so I want to be the straight man in that one."
And he actually, according to the IMDb trivia, Nick Cage gave up $100,000 of his personal salary for this movie $100,000 to Willem Dafoe, so that Willem Dafoe would appear in the movie, so the budget could afford him. And
so I can actually back that up. I read a couple of interviews with Paul Schrader. As it turned out, from what this interview said with Schrader, Willem Dafoe had a little bit of an ego damage from the disparity between his and Nicolas Cage's salary. So Paul Schrader was like, "Look, can you help him out? Give him a little bit of your money. It'll mean a lot to him if you pay him a little bit of your money, and then he'll be in the movie." And then Nicolas Cage agreed to do that. Which,
got to give Cage a lot of credit for that with his money troubles. But even more so, Willem Dafoe really owns this performance. He plays a character who is just broken. He's basically got the worst anger issues problem that you can possibly have, and he's repentant, but he also has no way of fixing what's broken in him.
We should point out the plot of this movie too involves them having to kidnap an infant.
Yeah,
and each of these characters, Nicolas Cage's character, Willem Dafoe's character, and then a third character played by
Christopher Matthew Cook.
Thank you. Who I could have sworn I'd seen before, but he didn't.
He was a character on The Walking Dead, apparently.
Yeah, I think that might be where I recognize him from. I stopped.
He was also in Under the Dome, NCIS New Orleans.
Watch that.
Let's see. Well, those were probably the biggest ones.
In any case, each of these characters react differently to this task, and they actually have a lot of. I like how these characters interact with each other. And I like a lot of the scenes in this movie and how they operate, because the movie is styled as trash, but the way Paul Schrader films it, there's a look to it that feels a lot more dynamic than something you would see streaming on Netflix, so to speak.
So if the way it feels to me is, if Goodfellas is a gangster film that a gangster anthology sort of story chronicling the life of a gangster in kind of a showy and almost admirable way, where it's like, man, he had it all. Dog Eat Dog takes a similar approach, but it takes that approach in like a more realistic way. This is how the scum of the earth actually are.
Of course, there is a scene where they're all high on drugs and spraying each other with those diner
mustard bottles
and ketchup bottles, like the generic red and yellow ones. This with a little squeeze top.
Yeah,
that was hilarious.
This movie is both funny and disturbing in just the right mix, I felt. I mean, it's going to immediately turn off some audiences because it goes some really dark places. But
Yes.
I really appreciate a good black comedy, and this nails it. It is oil black.
In the very beginning, a teenage girl is murdered, and she, as the guy is running at her, she hides under her covers in her bed. And it's like, all right, that's just the right kind of dumb.
Well, and the thing is, like, what else was she gonna do? Like, she didn't really have an escape plan, so you kind of wonder about that. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's worth noting the screenplay is written. It's based on a novel by Edward Bunker. Now, if you don't know who Bunker was, he was basically an ex-con who, after getting out after a series of criminal exploits, according to Wikipedia, he was convicted of bank robbery, drug dealing, extortion, armed robbery, and forgery, and had repeated offenses over and over again and escapes from jail and such. He eventually reformed and became a screenwriter / novelist. And this definitely has that feel of like recounting true events from a life of crime. Because a lot of it feels way too specific to be just completely made up.
Oh yeah, totally.
And as a writer, by the way, Edward Bunker is responsible for things such as the famous Jesse James movie, The Long Riders, that's the movie that is famous because it features like 4 pairs of brothers. You have James Keach and Stacy Keach acting alongside David Carradine and Robert Carradine, and Keith Carradine, and then Dennis Quaid and Randy Quaid, and then Christopher Guest and Nicholas Guest. So 5 pairs, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff like, he also wrote Runaway Train, which is a kind of an, and The Running Man. I almost forgot. He was one of the writers of screenwriters of The Running Man. So, anyway, with that said, this movie is really fascinating, and honestly, I almost wish we didn't have to talk about the movie for this, because this is Shark, and we're supposed to be talking about bad movies. We just kind of bumbled into a good movie.
Yeah, we lucked out. I mean, I think it's mostly my fault. I started watching an online review that was just saying like, "Wow, this is ridiculous," and I turned off the review right there. I was like, "Nope, I'm gonna go in as fresh as possible." And it turned out that
it was the right kind of ridiculous.
It's the right kind of ridiculous. I don't believe that this reviewer actually ended up liking it. They might have. I'll have to watch that review tonight and see what he said. I think it was Ralph the Movie Maker.
It's one of these movies where I get negative reviews because there's some things about it that are off-putting, but I would argue they're meant to be.
I think it has a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
That would make sense. This is definitely a movie that's going to be divisive. It's like Mandy. It's a movie where you love it, but you know that there are people who just are not going to buy into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah, it has an exact 50% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 53 on Metacritic.
Yeah. So with that said, that wraps up this week's conversation. We're talking, we got Nick Cage out of the way. We have one more week in Sharch, and it's of course our traditional Talking Dog week. I think next year we're going to expand that to Talking Animals so that we can get a little more diversity.
Because I've been just itching to watch Most Valuable Primate. You say that with so much consternation. Actually, I don't even know if any animals talk in that movie. That might have been before the evolution of the Air Bud franchise to include talking animals.
Yeah, whether he talks or not, maybe just animal movies.
I would volunteer that we skip most valuable primate, which is hockey, and then they'd had like MVP 2, most vertical primate when he starts skateboarding.
Oh God,
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we can jump to that. And actually, it's worth noting that there's if we expand it to just like animal movies in general, we would have such a huge. It doesn't necessarily even have to be talking animals, or actually, if we there are some talking animal movies that are pretty infamous. You ever heard of Hot to Trot with Bobcat Goldthwait?
Oh yeah,
that's one we gotta cover. I've never seen it, and I've heard nothing but bad things. And
definitely.
Even Bobcat has said that movie was just, it was what it was.
Oh, I wanted to point out one more thing about Dog Eat Dog that I loved, is that director Paul Schrader has a relatively major role in the movie.
Yes.
And it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really his first performance that he's given, isn't it?
Probably not his first performance, but he doesn't do it very often. It's kind of one of those novelties, like when you see Werner Herzog in Jack Reacher.
Right.
But it's like, it's a fun performance. He doesn't really do anything crazy, but it's like, hey, it's Paul Schrader. You know what? That's kind of great.
Yeah.
It's, I really enjoyed seeing him. I love Paul Schrader, and so the more we can get from him, the better.
Speaking of that, I just pulled up the IMDb for Paul Schrader. He has a movie that it doesn't have a release date yet, but it stars Tim Roth and Ron Perlman, and it's called The Jesuit.
Oh, I've heard of that.
And it says here, a man nicknamed the Jesuit is in prison for a crime he didn't commit. When his wife is murdered and his son kidnapped and he's taken to Mexico, he devises an elaborate and dangerous plan to rescue his son and avenge the murder. Uh-oh. Bill, not Bill, Hawk, this movie, you know what this movie is? This is a revenge movie.
Oh, yeah. I believe The Jesuit is something he's been wanting to make for quite some time.
I'm looking to see who else is in it. Well, Tim Roth and Ron Perlman alone is more than enough for me.
Yeah.
Brian Cox. Oh, shit. Yeah.
So, okay.
Sold.
Hold on a sec.
Neil McDonough?
I was looking at his filmography as well. Apparently, there is an unofficial director's cut of Dying of the Light, just called Dark. Paul Schrader took his first cut and the DVD of Dying of the Light and then recut it to his original vision.
Oh, wow.
It can be seen by prior request at the UCLA Film and Television Archive, the Harry Ransom Center, and the Museum of Modern Art Department of Film.
So in other words, it can only be seen if you go to those places? That sucks.
Well, he also put it up on the Pirate Bay.
Oh.
I do not advocate going to the Pirate Bay to see a movie, but I am reading off of Wikipedia, and use that information as you will.
Yes. So I actually I pulled up the IMDb just to see actors, and his character of El Greco in Dog Eat Dog is his only acting credit.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So there you go.
I would love to see him do some more acting stuff, like especially in his own movies. I would have loved to seen a cameo in First Reformed.
Yeah, he could have played one of the priests or something.
A priest, or maybe like a member of the parish who like occasionally says something insightful.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that gets me excited and also a little bit sad, because sometime either tonight or tomorrow I'm going to have to watch Marmaduke.
Yes. This is why I do this, for just garbage like that.
First of all, have you watched any dog movies yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I will hold off on Marmaduke at least until you've seen the first two movies. So,
okay.
So we're relatively in sync. You got to watch Pupstar, and you got to watch Cats and Dogs: The Revenge of Kitty Galore.
Kitty Galore, which is that is the lowest of hanging fruit for jokes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just so you know, I was talking to a friend at work today and telling him about the fact that I had to watch that movie, and all he said about that movie is, my son made me watch that shit for about 3 years straight. And having watched that movie last night, I have nothing but empathy for him. I don't think I could take watching that movie a second time, much less seeing it every day for 3 years.
I mean, I watched the Cat in the Hat 50 times over the course of 2 years. So
yeah, Pupstar is once again a Robert Vince movie, so you'll appreciate that.
It's got some modicum of like actual passion and work put into it. Like he's got his wheelhouse and he appreciates his work in that.
I think the thing is, I mean, it's not as well. I mean, because Kitty Galore is at least a professionally made movie. It just has a terrible script and no excuse for its flaws because it was made for $85 million. Yeah. Versus Pupstar was probably made for under $1 million, maybe $2 million at most, and they get a lot out of it production wise. Is it a good movie? Hell no, but there's moments in it where you'll be like, you know what, that's actually kind of creative.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I trust Robert Vince. I do. Like, we gotta hit him up on. I think we've contacted him on Twitter before, but we'll try it again. It's like, look, Robert Vince, we respect what you do.
I cannot wait because the last movie in this week is Puppy Star Christmas, which
did he also do that one?
Yes.
Okay. He made a lot of the Buddies movies, right?
He did all of them, I think.
Because, like, I think Robert Vince...
I think the one person who... I think there's, like, one movie he didn't direct, and I think that... I think it was, like, a friend of his who directed it or something.
I hope it wasn't Spooky Buddies, because...
I'm actually pulling up his filmography right now. We may as well... Let's resolve this now.
Immediately, yeah, because the villain Warlock in Spooky Buddies just surfing on his staff to get around is... I still stand by that as being a terrifically inspired character element.
So nearly every movie that he's ever directed, he also wrote, just so you know.
Okay.
He has 21 directing credits and 23 writing credits. And
he did Spooky Buddies.
Yes. And by the way, so as far as that, he starts... So his first movie that he did for the Disney run was Air Buddies. Then Snow Buddies, Space Buddies, Santa Buddies, The Search for Santa Paws, Spooky Buddies, Treasure Buddies, Santa Paws 2, The Santa Pups, Super Buddies, Russell Madness, Monkey Up, Pupstar, Pupstar Better Together, Pupstar World Tour, and then most recently, The Puppy Star Christmas.
Nice. This guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he's got a formula. And he's you know what he is? He's the Wes Anderson of talking dog movies. I meant that as a joke because Wes Anderson made a talking dog movie.
Oh yeah.
But no, he has a recognizable style. He knows his audience completely. And he caters to that audience very specifically and delivers to them. But he also there's this enduring love for what he's doing that I don't think I can't help but appreciate that, because it's one of those things where it's like it as much as these movies are not made for me, having seen as many as I have, I recognize that this guy loves what he fucking does.
Yeah.
And I don't get that feeling from like Michael Bay. I don't get a feeling that he enjoys what he does. There's a cynicism to it.
Especially with the last two Transformers movies.
Right. It's clear that he's going about the motions. And that's, friggin' 20 movies deep into these talking animal films, you get a feeling that he has a genuine passion for delivering children's talking dog movies.
There's a weird sense of fun to those movies that might not really cater to me as a almost 30-year-old male, but you can appreciate what he's doing for the people that like to watch those movies.
And honestly, I'm gonna just straight up own it and say, I freely admit that watching these movies is kind of entertaining. It's not necessarily for them being good movies, but because there's palpable love in these movies, and
they're kind of wacky.
Yeah, they're wacky and they're goofy. They take some weird chances in places you wouldn't expect a straight-to-video children's movie to do.
Yeah.
Not to give away too much, but in Pupstar, there's a lengthy period of time where one of the characters assumes the other is dead.
Okay.
And the way that it's played out is actually taken pretty seriously, considering the goofiness of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
I found that fascinating. And I also and I just can't not laugh at Ziggy Marley playing a total Rastafarian dog named Dog Gnarly.
Yeah.
Which is just so dumb, but my kind of dumb.
I also want to, just because I deserve it, I want to remind everyone that I rented all of the Buddies movies for that year.
Oh God, yeah, that's right.
I didn't watch.
They were all on Netflix.
They were all on Netflix, and I was renting them from Amazon. And at one point, I think I was saying like, "Oh man, here we go! I'll get another $4."
And then I just brought up again. I said, "You know, these are on Netflix, right?" And then I heard dead silence, and I said, "We talked about this last week," and you were just like, I could tell that there's that seething feeling where you're like, "You know what? We did." And I'm an idiot.
You know what? I support Robert Vince, and I will. You know what? It's okay. I spent like $20 or $25 over the course of that week renting all these things, and you know what? That's okay. I had an okay time. I'm all right that I spent that money for Robert Vince. Now, if I had rented all of the any other category that we've done so far, then maybe I'd be a little upset.
Like some of these other talking dog movies that just are a bit, abysmal.
Other talking dog movies are like other categories from past years. Like,
sure.
Out of all those categories, probably the Buddies movies is the least painful to have accidentally spent money on.
Yeah. But. Even I mean, I had to friggin' purchase that Madia prison one, and God damn it, I straight up I went into Amazon and I deleted it from my purchases because even though I paid money for it, I did not want to stare at that every time I pull up my purchases.
Yeah,
because that was the only way to watch it was by buying it.
Did I have to buy it too?
I think you might have
on Amazon, right?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay, I'll have to check my purchases and see if it's still on there. Maybe I deleted it, or maybe I figured out a way to not have to buy it. Or maybe you bought it. You did a rabbit. I can't remember, but
something. We did something. So, either way, we will we'll reconvene next week with even more conversation about talking dog movies. Hey, and then this week will be over, and then we can wait until next year, which. Maybe we'll do a shituary, or maybe we'll go back to Sharch. Who knows? Yeah,
definitely. We'll start thinking of categories, and I guess if anybody wants to suggest a category, we'll take suggestions.
I would also like to get other people involved in this. If we can drag Bill Leon into watching some Sharch movies, and maybe Bill Arsenault, that would be fascinating.
That would be fun. Yeah. I don't know if Bill A will be able to do it, but Bill Leon might be interested.
I think it's something where we might convince him to do a week, and then he'll realize what a chore it becomes.
Yeah.
Which is why we shortened it to 4 movies from 5, because Jesus Christ.
5 was fun, but man, that was exhausting. And I'm just like, I'm too old for that now.
Yeah, I'm too old for this shit. All right. Take it easy.
Yep. As easy as you can.